arkadaşlar. Kutu.
Lama ta kumbo jise jambe ala cha se Namo Manjushri Lori Namsha Shepala Yiche Loda Yini China Yiche Giseni Rayu Chiri Dimbayi Obodi Yewani 苏谢对面的接送，姐姐他给当波的，谢巴他们接你巴的，冈萨他的松巴伊，罗拉千年南达达，耶瓦松列他波尼，里巴罗伊千年，罗达谢巴里巴达，塞瓦南尼提吉，耶那南巴玛耶提。罗里顿多耶瓦达，切马达尼切米达，多杰多米罗尼达，我送达尼切巴达，切巴心中尼索玛，让有多达马多罗谢查，罗里顿多尼切达，谢谢送不多贝罗，谢谢马多罗伊拉，天耶瓦克吉，耶杰多罗送巴尼。多来我多许多年，哪怕小到梦想，有个到了人间的。
The students are reciting a text on the study of mind and awareness, giving the different categories of mind, such as division of mind to 7 and 3 and pairs of 2 and so forth. And also this text goes through the different working definitions of mind or awareness.
Toba Tangye Mazeri, Zinam Rani, Osomni, Tinila Akonda, Sema Lasso Sum, Tila Nijo Osomni, Tage Sila Sundeki, Tizi Goto Lechungwe, Pape Gigi Osomni, Tigi Gone Enani, Yena Takshe Pakis, Owe Gone Rela, Tongo Milo Langaso, Igi Gone Enani, Sidaji Kembao, Dongshu Muson Danata, Suda Kuzo Shebala, Sheba Jesu Palecho, Chena Wanye Chesa, Muson Danara, Shesong Tako Tupan, Toba Muson Danate, Ade me pasena tong ilo tong me lo she ti ji tian da den ji dong do zin be shi le to ba ye wa to ba ti nen da to ba ti me min jo ti je to ba ni da den jin ge to ba de shi la ne do do da ko do yu be ma shi ya ti sam ko sam ji to ba si me de ne shi de ji sam ji si ba da de la sam ne ni ne ko sam jo de la ya ya ko ti be ko se shi le ko ti me chang la ma nyo ji lo do shi sa ba da shi bo be mo sum se ma chi sam de chang she ba ne chi lu da ji ju bi ma chi sam de di ba chi le de som de pe ni ji da shi lo di bo ba ne ti shen tun jo ko we se ma da o bo me be se ma su bo ko no chang ye se sa ri ka be ti do di ba de mi mi da shi re ba da si ma nyam se ba ye se ma chi ju je tu ni chang ye se da lu ni ji ni su nge de la sa tu me lo di ba mi ti chi ni di ba ko se ma yi nghe bà xin lên đi kiếm xem mà lo kiếm ngay đã xem bà xem mà sum tên ta ya đã lại tên nè cô cứ thành chơi chơi bà thế bà đã chỉ chơi bà sum đồ chơi bà xem mà nhẹ chơi cứ nhẹ xem bà ra cái chơi tên tên chú bà mẹ nào mẹ chung về nghe bà rằng đã xin tôi đi chơi về xem mà ra lên xin lên đi kiếm xem mà lo ra đi nè cho nó sum gì xem mà nhị đã chơi bà đó chơi chơi nằm chơi không bà chơi khai rương cứ về xem mà ra lên nhị kiếm xem mà xin lên nhị kiếm xem mà chơi chơi có để bà nhị thằng bố bà đây mà để nghe sum rồi chơi là nó rằng đã chơi bà xí chơi bà xí nó nhị gà xí mẹ xem mà sum rồi xí mẹ kì chơi bà xí xin lên nhị kiếm xem mà xem mẹ kiếm nhà chơi để là xin lên nhị kiếm xem mà thế là xem mà em bé các bà là số như là nó yêu chơi gì nó yêu gì thì chơi chỉ để như là mấy cái cái gì rằng là xem mà thì xem mà cũng là nó yêu chỉ tóc về của chơi tóc ba thì cũng là gì
So this text was written by Akyayong in Yangzheng Gawe Lodge, whose real name was Lobsang Dendrup. And the text is called A Compendium of Ways of Knowing, a clear mirror of what should be accepted or rejected. So it begins with a homage to Manjushri, and then an explanation of the system of knowing involves, it says, an explanation of the system of knowing involves both knowledge, which is something that has an object, and it's also its objects. In general, things that have objects are defined as any functional phenomena that continually possesses or takes some object appropriate to itself. Such things may be phenomena having either physical qualities These are definitions, synonyms, or divisions. There are definitions, synonyms, and divisions of knowing. As for the first of these, the defining characteristic of a way of knowing awareness is awareness, knowing, cognizing. Being aware of and having a clear experience are all mutually exclusive terms. When ways of knowing are divided, there are many aspects. You can know something either with or without apprehending it. Moreover, you can know it in 7 different ways. In addition, there are both valid and invalid ways of knowing, as well as conceptual and non-conceptual ones. There are bare conceptions and inferential understanding, primary and secondary mental factors, and many such things. A way of knowing something is said to be either with or without apprehension, depending on whether or not it apprehends its own object. Of the 7 ways of knowing, you can apprehend things through bare perception, inference, or subsequent cognition. With the other 4, you know something, but you have not apprehended it, and so forth. Then at the end, the children said the long life prayer in one verse of His Holiness. Now we are reciting the prayer of Manjushri, praise to the Intelligent One, homage to the Lama and protector Venerable Manjushri, who holds in his heart a scripture symbolic of his seeing all as it is, everything as it is, whose pure genius shines like the sun, unclouded by the 2 obscurations, who with compassion like a father for his only child teaches with 60-fold eloquence all beings imprisoned in cyclic existence, groping in the darkness of ignorance and overwhelmed by suffering. You, whose thunder-like proclamation of the perfection of wisdom arouses us from the stupor of our afflictions and frees us from the iron chains of karma, who wields wisdom's sword, vanquishing the darkness of ignorance, hewing down all our every sprout of suffering. You, who are primarily pure, gone to the end of the 10 grounds, complete embodiment of every excellence, whose princely body is graced with 112 adornments, O Manjushri, to you I bow. Dispel the darkness of my mind. O Marabhasanadi is the mantra of Manjushri. With the brilliance of your mind, wisdom, O compassionate one, illuminate the darkness of my mind's confusion. Grant me the light of self-assured intelligence that I may see into the Buddha's word and their treatises that explain them. So this the recitation of the verses of salutation from Prajnaparamita, commentary on Prajnaparamita called Abhisamaya Alankara by Maitreya, Lord Maitreya, which says homage to the through the knowledge of all, the Shravakas, or disciples seeking peace, are led to true peace. Through the knowledge of the path, those intending to benefit transmigrating beings fulfill the aims of the world, being perfectly endowed with omniscient mind. The Munis, or sages, give various teachings with all kinds of aspects. I bow down to the Mother of the Buddhas, together with the communities of hearers and bodhisattvas. And then the mandala offering. And the verse of salutation from verses of salutation from the wisdom, fundamental wisdom verses of the middle way by Master Nagarjuna. I prostrate to the perfect Buddha, the best of all teachers, who taught that which arises through dependent relationship is without cessation, without arising, as no annihilation, no permanence, without coming, without going, without distinction, without identity, and peaceful, free from fabrications. And then the verse of salutation of a praise to Prajnaparamita, the perfection of wisdom, Barahulam, homage to the perfection of wisdom, the mother of all the victorious ones, Buddhas, of the 3 times, which is beyond words, inconceivable, inexpressible, unproduced and unobstructed in the nature of space, the objective domain of the self-awareness wisdom, that Yatha Gata Gata Para Gata Para Samgata Bodhi Swaha. His Holiness is asking if the children have also memorized the text, which is a versified text on the formal logic and reason, if they have memorized that text or not, along with the text that they have recited earlier. I have memorized these two texts when I was a small child. So the Tibetan teachers were learned as well as accomplished practitioners, have thought of a long-term benefit for our tradition to survive long. So they have devised tools like this kind of summarized text of text on mind and awareness, and also logic and reason. So I have memorized these two texts by Ajahn Yongzin. So you have memorized the text on mind and awareness, cognition.
So
the children are beginning to, on their way to recite, memorizing the text on logic. Geshe Losang Dakwara told His Holiness, and then His Holiness saying, I have memorized this text on logic and reason when I was a small child. What these show is that the study of Buddhist philosophy, Buddhism, the Buddha's teaching in the Tibetan tradition is not just what the Lama says to the kids, but they are actually encouraged to memorize authentic texts. And these texts are memorized and then are recited by the students. So the tradition has it that the teachers make their students do that, memorize the text. Whether the children understand the text, the content or not, but they are first made to memorize the text and then go over the text with the teacher, explaining the different contents of the text. So we are now living as refugees, as exiles. From a wider perspective, we can see that on the whole, the world is not taking that much interest in studying in depth the teaching of the Buddha and the great treatises written by Indian masters. But we, the Tibetans, have kept the tradition of the Buddha, the teaching of the Buddha and its commentarial treatises for over 1,000 years now. Not only have we kept the tradition, the text, but we have also kept the tradition of memorizing the text and studying them more thoroughly. So let us, this is the grace for tea. Salutation to Manjushri, which says, homage to Manjushri, who has a youthful appearance, who brightly shines the light of wisdom and dispels the darkness of the triple world. So with regard to the study of Buddhist scriptures, it seems the Chinese also had a good tradition, and also maybe this exists in Vietnam and Korea and so forth. But in the Tibetan tradition, we have the studying about the mind, tradition of studying about mind and knowledge, or knowledge and awareness. And such texts like what the children had recited, or memorized in childhood. I have done it when I was a kid. So I memorized the text on mind and also the summarized text on logic and reason. I had recited in front of my two tutors, Yongzin Ling Rinpoche and Yongzin Tujiang Rinpoche. And so, when you study about mind and awareness, you go through the definitions of mind and the divisions and the synonyms and so forth. And then when we have to use logic to understand the points that we wish to prove, we learn. In order to do that, we learn logic and reason. So what this shows is that the Tibetan Buddhist tradition in keeping up the tradition of the Buddha's teaching, the Dharma, we first memorize the text and then study in depth. So this is a very good example for others as well. So though I have the title of a Dalai Lama, and I sat on thrones, even as a small child, I had to memorize these texts on the summarized text on logic and also mind and awareness. Though I didn't understand in the beginning the meaning of these texts, and also I didn't have much interest in my studies, but later, when I found people paying attention to and taking interest in understanding about mind and emotions, then what I had memorized and recited in my childhood, I had found its significance of doing study of these texts. So the summarized text of Ajahn Yongzin's mind and awareness, and also the logic and reason. His Holiness was wondering who the author of these texts were. Ajahn Yongzin. So I had memorized these two texts, though I didn't have much interest in my studies. So these days, when there is so much interest in Buddhism, and particularly Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and people take interest in the explanation, the commentarial tradition of Tibetan, these texts are proving very beneficial. So I used to be quite good in my memorization of the text on mind and awareness, and also logic and reason. So perhaps I was better. I could better recite it than my recited better than my tutors. So this tradition that we have of memorizing the texts and then going into study is very good tradition. Though as kids we don't understand much of the meaning, but we still memorize the words. And then later, when we understand, we go over the text, think about them, and reflect on them. And so this gives us better understanding of the texts after having done an in-depth study of the different texts. Sorry. So you have recited the text on mind and awareness, but has any one of you memorized the Tagrik, the text on logic and reason? Seems nobody has done it yet. So I have memorized the two texts. I wasn't really good. I wasn't really interested in my studies in those days, but I've memorized the text. So now, so I bow to my Guru and Guardian, the ennobling, impeccable Manjushri. Your intelligence clearly shines forth like the sun, free from the clouds of the two obscurations. As you see the extent of all the varieties of things and how they exist, you hold the scriptural text to your heart. Your affection for all of us masses who wander, overpowered by misery, groping in the darkness of ignorance, in the dungeons of our compulsive existence, is like that for a lone child, like that of father for a lone child. Your speech is melodious with 60 facets, the thunderous roar of which arouses us from the stupor of our disturbing emotions, frees us from the iron chains of our karma, dispels the gloom of our ignorance, and slashes our suffering wherever they sprout. Thus you brandish a sword, pure from the core, and having traversed the 10 grounds, your set of enlightening qualities is complete. Thus, as a spiritual son of the triumphant ones, your body is bedecked with the enlightening adornments 10 times 10 plus 12. Please remove the darkness from my mind. Om Manjushri, I bow down to you. And now recite the mantra Manjushri. Om Marabazana Deo 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 Marabazana Deo. This mantra of Manjushri, Arabazana, is short mantra. And when I was a small child, around age 2 or something like that, I was in at Kumbum Monastery, which is in the vicinity of my home, my birthplace. I have seen small monks, little monks, very young monks reciting Arabhajana. So mantra of Manjushri. So I'm familiar with this since then. So I feel quite fortunate to have recited this mantra of Manjushri since my childhood. Have you finished your tea? In Tibet in the past, there was Yongzin, one of the tutors to the previous Dalai Lama, Pubuchok or somebody. A person went to see him and told him that you are actually an incarnation of Manjushri. But the Lamas replied, said that I don't know if I am a reincarnation or manifestation of Manjushri or in a human body or not, but I am a neighbor of Manjushri. So me too, I could perhaps say that so not only have I studied all the different these philosophical traditions, the philosophical schools of Buddhism, but I have also studied the different religions of the world. And so maybe I am blessed with the wisdom, the 4 types of wisdom, which are called the great wisdom, deep wisdom, quick wisdom, swift wisdom, and clear wisdom. So because of that, I can say that I am a neighbor of Manjushri. So we Tibetans have quite a good intelligence to make distinction between what is right and wrong. So the school children, you need also to pay attention to these 4 kinds of wisdom or intelligence. The wisdom with which you can have grasping power, and clear wisdom, and swift wisdom, and profound or deep wisdom, so that you can actually think in terms of logical approach, saying if A is something, then B must be this or that. And so in this way you can use logic better in your study of the different subjects. So the Tibetan children in the different schools in order to develop your wisdom and intelligence further, if you could pray to Manjushri and recite the prayer and mantra of Manjushri, you will be able to develop these 4 kinds of wisdom or intelligence within yourself. So please do pray to Manjushri and recite the Arabhajana mantra of Manjushri. So His Holiness' attendant indicated that he is left with reciting the final concluding prayer to Manjushri. Affectionate one, with light rays of your supreme knowledge, you clear the darkness of naivety from my mind. Grant me, please, the light of confident intelligence to fully fathom the classic text of Buddha's words and their commentaries. So with that, His Holiness is done with the oral transmission of Manjushri, prayer of Manjushri, called the praise to the intelligent one. As I said, I was born in Siling, in a very remote place in Siling. But so I recited the Arabhata, the Manjushri mantra. So first, that was the first mantra that I had started reciting as a small child. So since my childhood, as I have recited Manjushri mantra, and also I admired Manjushri since my childhood, so I feel very fortunate on my part. And my Dharma friends, you should also pray to Manjushri. By doing so, this human intelligence that we have can be developed into the 4 types of wisdom. Wisdom that is great, wisdom that is clear, wisdom that is profound and deep, and wisdom that is quick, so that you'll be able to analyze things better, to see the different inconsistencies in the statements in the text or people's statements. So of course this is taught in the Dharma, but we can use it without talking about the religion aspect as such. So not only should we recite mantras, but it's important for us to always critically think and analyze things. So as I said before, the Manjushri, that I am a neighbor of Manjushri, someone close to it, him. So one Geshe said that I don't know if I am a reincarnation or manifestation of Manjushri, but I am a neighbor of Manjushri. So we should also make ourselves closer, make ourselves to feel closer to Manjushri through our use of intelligence and doing our studies. So my mind is quite clear and sharp, which is due to the blessing of Manjushri. Perhaps I have told this story to you before. I saw myself in my dream that I was in a in a hall in Manjushri in Varanasi, and in that hall, in the center of the hall, was Shakyamuni Buddha. And I went to the Munindra Buddha. He was actually beckoning me to come to him. And then I had nothing more to offer, but I offered chocolate candy to him. So, personally, I felt that Buddha was actually taking care of me, and I have this confidence, or the inner confidence, and that the Buddha is taking care of me. So I have done my best so far in my life, and for the sake of the teaching of the Buddha, and going forth from here, I will do my best to serve the Dharma by integrating the teaching with science and technology. So I have done that so far to the best of my ability, and I will do so in the future as well. So I wrote this text, The Key to the Middle Way, a treatise on the realization of emptiness. So it begins with a homage to perfection of wisdom. I respectfully bow down to the conqueror, protector of all beings through boundless compassion, with dominion over glorious wisdom and deeds, but who, like an illusion, is only designated by words and thoughts. So whether we talk about whether it's the objects of refuge whom we submit ourselves to, or it's the sentient beings whom we feel compassionate towards, they are merely designated. I will explain here in brief terms, the essence of the ambrosia of his good speech, the mode of the union of emptiness and dependent arising, to increase the insight of those with burgeoning intellect. We all want happiness and do not want suffering. Moreover, achieving happiness and eliminating suffering depend upon the deeds of body, speech, and mind. As the deeds of body and speech depend upon the mind, we must therefore constructively transform the mind. The ways of constructively transforming the mind are to cause mistaken states of consciousness not to be generated, and good states of consciousness to be both generated and increased. So when we talk about the mistaken states of consciousness, it's not just enough to say, oh, this is said in the text, but we must actually learn and know them from our experience, and then discard them, and then increase those of the good states of mind. What are the determinants in this context of a bad state of consciousness? A state of consciousness, once produced, may initially cause ourselves to become unhappy, and our previously calm mind suddenly to become excited or tense. This may then act as the cause of hard breathing, nervous sweating, illness, and so forth. From these, in turn, bad deeds of body and speech may arise, which directly or indirectly may also cause hardships for others. All states of consciousness that give rise to such a causal sequence are assigned as bad. The determinants of good states of consciousness, on the other hand, are just the opposite. All states of consciousness that cause the bestowal of the fruit of happiness and have peace upon ourselves and others, either superficially or in depth, are assigned as good. As for ways of causing mistaken states of consciousness not to be generated, there are such means as undergoing brain operation, ingesting various types of drugs, making our awareness dull, as if overcome with drowsiness, and making ourselves senseless, as if in deep sleep. However, apart from only occasional superficial help, these mostly do more harm than good from the point of view of deep solutions. Therefore, the ways of the beneficially transforming the mind is as follows. First, we must think about the disadvantages of bad states of consciousness, identifying them from our own personal experience. Then we must recognize so the good states of mind, the good experiences that we experience should be increased, and the bad ones, which initially may not seem very bad, but then as we get used to them, or as we get more spoiled by them, they become bad for us. So we need to increase compassion, love, and so forth. Then we must recognize the good states of consciousness. If familiarity with them is developed through thinking again and again about the disadvantages and about its supporting validators, then the various types of good states of consciousness will become stronger. This occurs through the force of familiarity with, and through these good states of consciousness, having valid foundation and being qualities dependent on the mind, and thus capable of limitless development, then it is natural that the defective states of consciousness will decrease in strength. Thereby, in time, sure signs of goodness will appear in mind. Many such different methods of transforming the mind have been taught by the many great teachers of this world, in accordance with the individual times and places, and in accordance with the minds of individual trainees. Among these, many methods of taming the mind have been taught in the books of Buddhists. From among these, a little will be said here about the view of emptiness. View of selflessness are taught in both Buddhist vehicles, the Mahayana and Hinayana, and with respect to the Mahayana in both sutras and tantra divisions, when a Buddhist and non-Buddhist are differentiated by way of behavior, the difference is whether or not the person takes refuge in the three jewels. When they are differentiated by way of view, the difference in whether or not the person asserts the views which are the four seals, satisfying to the doctrines, being word of the Buddha. The four seals are all composite phenomena are impermanent, all contaminated things are miserable, all phenomena are empty and selfless, nirvana is peace. Therefore, all Buddhists assert that all phenomena are empty and selfless. With respect to the meaning of selflessness, here is the selflessness of persons, that is, non-existence of a persons as substantial entities or self-sufficient entities. This is asserted by all four Buddhist schools of Tenet, Vaibhashik, Sautantik, Chittamatra, and Madhyamaka. The Chittamatrans assert, in addition, a selflessness of phenomena, that is, an emptiness of objects and subjects as different entities. The Madhyamics assert a selflessness of phenomena, that is, an emptiness of inherent existence. The meaning of views of lower and higher schools of Tenets differs greatly in coarseness and subtlety. However, in degrees of subtlety. However, if understanding is developed with respect to the lower systems, this serves as a means of deep ascertainment of the higher views. Therefore, it is very helpful to do so. Here, selflessness is to be discussed in accordance with the Madhyamaka system, and within the division of the Madhyamaka into Savatantrika and Prasangik, in accordance with the Prasangic system. Did the Blessed One set forth all these different schools of Tenet? If he did, on what sutras do each rely? Also, does the difference of status and depth of the schools of Tenets necessarily depend on scriptural authority? The answer: the different views of the four schools of Tenets were set forth by the Buddha by the Blessed One himself, in accordance with the mental capacities of his trainees, whether superior, middling, or lower. Some trainees were likely to fall into the views of nihilism and were in danger of losing faith if taught selflessness. For them, Buddha even taught the existence of a self in some sutras. Also, some trainees were likely to go either to the extreme of eternity or the extreme of annihilation if Buddha answered their questions in the positive or the negative. For them, the Buddha did not say either exist or does not exist, but remained silent, as in the case of the 14 inexpressible views. Also, with respect to the modes of selflessness, Buddha set forth many forms, as was briefly explained above. The sutras on which each of the schools rely are as follows. The Vaibhashic and Saudantic schools of tenets rely mainly on the sutras of the first wheel of doctrine, such as the Sutra of the Four Truths. Four Noble Truths. The Chittamatras of the school of tenets relies mainly on the sutra of the last wheel of doctrine, such as the unraveling of the thought sutras. The Madhyamik school relies mainly on the sutras of the middle wheel of the doctrine, such as the 100,000 stanzas of Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. There are ways of presenting the three series of wheels of doctrine from the point of view of place, time, subject, and trainee, but this is not a place for such a lengthy discussion. Next, provisory and definitive teachings. If it were necessary to differentiate the status and depths of the school's different views in dependence on scriptural authority, then, since the individual sutras each say that the system which it teaches is superior system, we may wonder which scripture should be held as true. If one scripture were held to be true, we would then wonder how the other discordant sutras should be considered. But if the modes of truth of one sutra, and the non-truth of the others were necessarily provable only by scriptural authority, then the process would be endless. Therefore, the differentiation of the superiority and inferiority of views must rely on reasoning. Thus, the Mahayana Sutras say that it is necessary to distinguish what requires interpretation and what is definitive. Thinking of this, the Buddha says in a sutra, monks or scholars should well analyze my words like gold to be tested through melting, cutting, and polishing, and then adopt them, but not for the sake of showing me respect. The Four Reliances. In his ornament of the Mahayana Sutras, Maitreya commented well on the meaning of the Buddha's thought in that statement and set forth the four reliances. One should not rely on the person of a teacher, but on the tenet or doctrine that he teaches. One should not rely merely on the euphony and so forth of his words, but on their meaning. With respect to the meaning, one should not rely on those teachings that require interpretation. Such interpretation would be necessary if there were some other non-explicit base in the teacher's thought, if there were a purpose for the teaching being stated in the interpretable form, and if the explicit words of the teaching were susceptible to refutation. One should rely rather on those teachings that have definitive meaning, that is, which do not require interpretation. With respect to the definitive meaning, one should not rely on dualistic consciousness, but on non-conceptual wisdom. So what is emptiness? We need to get a conceptual understanding of emptiness through reasoning. With respect to non-conceptual wisdom that apprehends a profound emptiness, one first cultivates a conceptual consciousness that apprehends an emptiness, and when a clear perception of the object of meditation arises, this becomes a non-conceptual wisdom. Moreover, the initial generation of the conceptual consciousness must depend solely on a correct reasoning. Fundamentally, therefore, this process traces back solely to a reasoning, which itself must fundamentally trace back to the valid experiences common to ourselves and others. Thus, it is the thought of Dignaga and Dharmakirti, the kings of reason, that fundamentally a reasoning derives from an obvious experience. the object of negation. Question: for the sake of improving the mind, what is the use of developing valid cognizer and states of consciousness that realize the presentations of views of emptiness? What practitioners need is a sense of practical application and goodness. It is the scholars who need to be learned. There are many stages in the improvement of the mind. There are some in which analysis of reason is not necessary, such as when trusting faith alone is to be cultivated single-pointedly. Not much strength, however, is achieved by that, just that alone, especially for developing the mind to delimit this goodness. It is not sufficient merely to familiarize the mind with its object of meditation. The object of meditation must involve reasoning. Further, it is not sufficient for object to have reasons in general. The meditator himself must know them and have found a conviction in them. Therefore, it is impossible for the superior type of practitioners not to have intelligence. Still, if we are forced to choose between a sense of practical application and learnedness, a sense of practical application would be more important. And for one who has this, will receive the full benefit of whatever he knows. The mere learnedness of one whose mind is not tamed can produce and increase bad states of consciousness, which cause unpleasantness for himself and others, instead of happiness and peace of mind that were intended. One could become jealous of those higher than oneself, competitive with equals, and proud and contemptuous towards those lower, and so forth. It is as if medicine had become poison. Because such danger is great, it is very important to have a composite learnedness, a sense of practical application and goodness. Without having learnedness destroy the sense of practical application, or having the sense of practical application destroy learnedness. So when it comes to the mind, we can actually talk about the mind which is in a very manifest state, or in a latent state, and so forth. Concerning the improvement of the mind, in order to ascertain the meaning of selflessness or an emptiness, it is necessary to ascertain first the meaning of just what a phenomena is empty of. When we refer to an emptiness, the Bodhisattva Shantideva says in his Engaging the Bodhisattva Deeds, without identifying the imputed thing, its non-existence cannot be apprehended. Just so, without ascertaining that of which a phenomenon is empty, an understanding of its emptiness does not develop. Emptiness means emptiness of inherent existence. Of what is it that a phenomenon is empty? When we Prasankhya speak of emptiness, we are not referring to the situation in which one object is empty of some other inexistent entity. Thus, though we may commonly speak of an empty rainbow, since the rainbow is empty of anything tangible, this type of emptiness is not what we have in mind.
So
His Holiness has reached this point on page 7, where he quotes Master Nagarjuna's text. When actions and afflictions cease, there is liberation, and so forth. So inherent existence has never been validly known to exist. Therefore, it is impossible for there to be any phenomena that exists through its own power, since it is experienced that mere dependent arisings, which are in fact empty of inherent existence, do cause all forms of help and harm. So these are established as existence. Thus, mere dependent arising do exist. Therefore, all phenomena exist in the manner of appearing as varieties of dependent arisings. They appear this way without passing beyond the sphere or condition of having just this nature of being utterly non-inherently existent. Therefore, all phenomena have two entities. One entity that is its superficial mode of appearance, and one entity that is its deep mode of being. These two are also respectively conventional truths and ultimate truths. The superior Nagarjuna says in the fundamental text called wisdom, doctrines taught by the Buddha rely only on the two truths, wholly on two truths, conventional and worldly truths, and the truths that are ultimate. Also, the glorious Chandrakirti says in his supplement to this treatise on the middle way, Buddha said that all phenomena have two entities. Those found by perceivers of the true and of the false. Objects of perceivers of the true are realities. Objects of perceivers of the false are conventional truths. The divisions of ultimate truths will be briefly explained below. Conventional truths themselves are divided into the real and unreal just from the point of view of an ordinary worldly consciousness, Chandrakirti says in the supplement. Also, those which perceive falsities are said to be of two types, those with clear sense and those having defective ones. Our consciousness having a defective sense is said to be wrong in relation to one with a sense that is sound. Objects realized by the world and apprehended by the six non-defective senses are only the true from the worldly point of view. The rest are presented as unreal only from the viewpoint of the world. The purpose of knowing thus the presentation of the two truths is as follows. Since it is utterly necessary to be involved with these appearances, which bring about varieties of good and bad effects, it is necessary to know the two natures, superficial and deep, of these objects to which we are related. For example, there are many cunning and deceptive neighbors with whom it is always necessary for us to interact and to whom we have related by way of estimation of him that accords only with his pleasant external appearance. The various losses that we have sustained in this relationship are due to the fault of our merely having interacted with that man. Rather, the fault lies with our mistaken manner of relating to him. Further, because of not knowing the man's nature, we have not estimated him properly and have thereby been deceived. Therefore, if that man's external appearance and his fundamental nature had both been well known, we would have related to him with this reserve appropriate to his nature and with whatever corresponded to his capacities and so forth. Had he done this, we would not have sustained any losses. The middle way between existence and non-existence. Similarly, phenomena had no deep mode of being other than their external or superficial mode of being, and if thus the way they appeared and the way they existed were in agreement, then it would be superficial to hold that conventional mode of appearance are true just as they appear, and to place confidence in them. However, this is not so. Though phenomena appear as if they are true, most true, ultimately, they are not true. Therefore, phenomena abide in the middle way, not truly or inherently existent, and also not utterly non-existent. This view on the way or way of viewing the knowledge of such a mode of being, just as it is called the view of the middle way. With respect to this, the way in which there is no inherent existence or self is as follows. Whatever object appears to us now, forms, sounds, and so forth, which are cognized by the eyes, ear, and so on, or objects cognized by the mind, or objects experienced, and so forth, experienced objects of experience and so forth, these objects are basis of a negation. Basis of negation, in relation to which the object of that negation, inherent existence, is negated. They appear to be inherently existent or existing as independent entities or existing objectively. Therefore, all consciousness are mistaken except for the wisdom that directly cognizes emptiness. Emptiness doesn't deny the possibility of valid conventional truth. If all those consciousnesses that are not directly cognizing emptiness are mistaken, does this mean that there are no valid cognizers which could testify the existence of conventionally existent phenomena, such as forms and so on? Or does this mean that since this criterion of a phenomenon existing conventionally would have to be its existing from a mistaken perverse consciousness rather than its existing for a valid cognizer, it would follow that the non-existence of any phenomenon could not occur, because any phenomenon could be cognized by a mistaken consciousness. Answer: it is not contradictory for the consciousness to be mistaken on the one hand, because objects appear to it as if they inherently existed, and on the other hand, for it to be valid, because it is not deceived with respect to its main object. For example, a visual consciousness perceiving a form is indeed a mistaken consciousness because the form appears to it as inherently existent. However, to the extent that it perceives the form as a form and does not conceive the form to be inherently existent, it is a valid cognizer. Not only that, but a visual consciousness perceiving a form is also a valid cognizer with respect to the appearance of the form, and even with respect to the appearance of the form seeming to be inherently existent. All dualistic consciousnesses, therefore, are valid direct cognizers with respect to their own object of perception, because in the expression, a consciousness knowing its object, a consciousness refers to a clear knower, which is generated in the image of its object through the force of the appearance of its object. Further, the criterion for a phenomenon's existing conventionally is not merely its existing for a mistaken, perverse consciousness. For example, an appearance of falling hairs manifestly appear to the visual consciousness of someone with cataract. Because his consciousness has been generated the image of a falling hairs, it is a valid, direct cognizer with respect to that object of perception. However, since the falling hairs, which are the basis of such an appearance, are utterly non-existent, the consciousness is deceived with respect to its main object. Thus, because this consciousness of falling hair is directly contradicted by the consciousness with a valid mode of perception, it is asserted to be wrong consciousness. However, how could existing for this mistaken consciousness be the criterion of phenomena existing conventionally? So, whatever we perceive, they appear in a certain way, whereas they exist in another way. So, things that are conventional are not, are said to be conventional when they exist without us being, doing any kind of a critical analysis into their nature and so forth. So just their existence through a valid cognition makes them inexistent. Mandala offering, a Thanksgiving mandala offering. This ground anointed with flowers, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as the Buddha felt and offer it to you. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. In the land surrounded by the fence of snow mountains, you are the source of everything good and happiness. Lord Avalokiteshvara in person, Tenzin Gyatso. Tenzin Gyatso, Lord Avalokiteshvara, may you live until the samsara comes to an end. This is a prayer of words of truth. And this last prayer says, may whatever is undertaken by those malevolent beings, be they visible or invisible, who, due to their perverse aspirations in the past, are hostile to the Buddha's teaching, be uprooted by the truth of the three jewels.
说的30个女朋友。
3月初。
东岳女界，苏诺就被人直接。